ADHD women in particular internalize their emotions, especially anger, but including anger. And women are the top listed of late diagnoses and misdiagnosed population of ADHDers. Hello, truth tellers. Welcome back to the ADHD Scapegoat Podcast. I'm Angie.
I'm Jeremy. Today we're going to discuss healthy anger, how anger is very different from rage, and how authentic anger protects you from mistreatment.
Right. What if I told you that the anger you were taught to suppress could actually be the key to your healing? If you've been labeled too sensitive, too dramatic, too much, I'm pointing at myself, especially growing up in a narcissistic family, you probably learned to stuff your anger and stuff it down just to survive. But what if the real healing begins the moment you stop seeing anger as the problem and start using it as proof that something mattered? Start by asking yourself, what am I no longer willing to tolerate? I think that is something, especially when you have ADHD and your natural justice sensitivity, that always felt where the misunderstanding was between me and everyone in my family. They just don't understand. But it was more like, no, they weren't even tolerating me speaking up. I was angry for a reason, right?
Yeah, you were angry because you couldn't express yourself, it was being ignored, or you were told.
Yeah, it's like I had an
Stop.
opinion. Right. I wanted to speak up, or, asking the questions. All the things that made it seem like I was angry, and probably made me more angry because they weren't seeing what I was trying to express, right?
Yeah, and we've talked about this before too, where, you're energetic, you're very enthusiastic, and sometimes that comes across as angry or aggressive when you're just excited to get this thought out and express yourself and ask a question. It can feel aggressive, like, oh, she's coming at me. And it's really just, I'm excited to talk about this.
Right. And it's funny that, depending on the person that you bring that energy to, you bring the same energy to this group of people, and one person is like, whoa, back up, that's too much. And the other person is like, oh my gosh, I want to be around her all the time. This is infectious, right?
Yes.
So
I'm in the latter group. But it's on or off, right? There's not levels. It's not a dial that you're turning. There's no dimmer switch.
No.
You're on or you're off.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I think.
Got it. Yeah. Well, so anger plays an important role in your healing too.
Yeah.
Right.
It always has.
Okay. And it's a signal, not a problem.
Absolutely. And it's funny because until I didn't have the words for it back then, but that's what my body was telling me. That's what this quote unquote Angie Weiner thing was about. Was I knew that there was a reason why I needed to express these things. There's a reason why that was happening. I just didn't have, the maturity when I was a child, or, the support or understanding from anyone to actually communicate it clearly.
Right.
So I think a lot of times when we talk about healthy anger, or when anyone just talks about anger in general, depending on the way you grew up or what your experiences are with anger, a lot of people attribute anger to rage rather than a healthy anger. So we just want to briefly talk about the differences between those two. So rage is like dysregulated, explosive, aggressive, usually reactive to someone else, which of course the person that's raging uses an excuse. They're reacting to you. If you hadn't done that, they wouldn't have done, they wouldn't have had that response, which is not taking any accountability for the way they're treating someone else, or, you know, just basically word vomiting all of their internal crap onto you. Whereas healthy anger is actually clear, focused, and empowering. So you're expressing anger it's a signal. When you feel anger and you go to express it, that's you empowering yourself. That's you standing up for, this thing feels wrong and I'm not happy about it and I need to communicate it so it doesn't continue, right? Mm-hmm. That's how a healthy anger is expressed. And suppressed anger, so when you're not showing either of these and you're just completely shutting down, it manifests in burnout, anxiety, depression, just loads of additional problems that you're kind of forcing yourself to experience by suppressing your anger or feeling like it's wrong.
Yeah, it's kind of cathartic too to express that anger in a safe setting, right?
Oh, absolutely.
We do this, my core group of coworkers that I work very closely with, especially in the summer, it's, we all understand that it's a safe space, and we kind of have these little, we call them golf cart talks, because we go sit on a golf cart and have a discussion away from like more impressionable ears. But we get that anger out. We're not angry at the person that we're talking to. We're angry about something, and instead of suppressing it and letting it become anxiety or depression or anything like that,
passive-aggressive behavior,
we have to get it out.
Right.
And then the listeners are able to then express some potential solutions or, at least stopgaps for getting past what you're feeling angry about.
Right.
And a lot of times it's just built up frustration. It gets pent up, and when you don't have an outlet, I think that's why, it's probably a terrible example, but if we're working on a project or something and I swear, it's not because I'm mad at you or something that you did. It's because I just need to get that out to release it. It's just like a...
Well, that's the whole reason we're having any of these conversations. That's why we're speaking out. That's why everyone has a voice, is because, suppressing anything or, a lot of times you're suppressing it and then you rage because you haven't done the healthy process. You haven't communicated it healthy. You haven't had a safe place to vent. You haven't, actually been able to communicate the issue. Like maybe when you're having these golf cart talks, maybe you're asking for a solution, or maybe you're just asking for, validation. Is that happening, or is that not happening? Is that just in my head? But if you never talk about it, maybe it's both. It's happening for both of you internally, but neither of you are talking about it. It's just building up in both of you. And what a release it is when you're both actually like, oh my gosh, I've been feeling that way for weeks, and we both said it. Oh, we should have talked about this sooner, or, whatever the case may be. But yeah.
I can only imagine how, compounded this gets when you're an ADHD child.
Yeah.
So you don't have, like you said, you don't have all of the terms to express the frustration or anger. Right. But then you're in a toxic family environment. So any little bits of it that you are able to verbalize and get out are immediately squashed. And and you're punished for it, essentially.
In some way, yeah. Yeah. And I think like looking at the differences between rage, healthy anger, and suppressing it, I think if you actually sit down and fully understand the differences, you can clearly see where it's coming from. You know what I mean? Like, until you actually sit back and look at it, sometimes it can be like, feel like it's all over the place or it's overwhelming. Mm-hmm. So I think have you ever wondered why you explode or why you're completely shut down when you're overwhelmed? That reaction isn't just impulsivity. It happens when you've been conditioned to fear your own anger. That's a powerful difference between toxic rage and healthy focused anger. Very clear. And once you feel it, you'll never confuse the two again. You really don't. So notice the next time your body says no before your mouth does. I think a lot of times we fall into an automatic response or, a knee-jerk reaction, or maybe it's just, I've never looked at this as a problem until now. So now I need to reevaluate. This doesn't really work for me anymore. Or, because that's just what I always knew. That was my normal, but it doesn't feel right. So you actually have to listen to your body. And I think that's part of why anger is weaponized in these toxic families. So you don't listen to your body. You don't listen to your intuition. You divert to what they say is truth.
Right.
So let's talk about how society polices anger in women. Oh, I love this one. So the double standard, obviously, if you show your assertiveness, then you're being aggressive or too emotional, too intense. If you look at a guy being assertive, oh, he's powerful, he's strong, he knows what he wants. It's very clear. And ADHD women in particular internalize their emotions, especially anger, but including anger. And women are the top listed of late diagnoses and misdiagnosed population of ADHDers. So many women and girls present in usually more the inattentive type. So their hyperactivity isn't externalized and they aren't the hyper tomboy like I was, but more internalized. So they're daydreaming and they're full of anxiety and it's all up here and they're perfectionistic, all of those traits. But they're also, women are made to feel guilty for having any or showing any sort of anger. Ever wished, to the women out there, ever wished that you would stop feeling guilty every time you get angry? When you grow up with emotional gaslighting, especially for neurodivergent women of any kind, you learn to question your reactions until eventually you don't trust them at all. But what if your anger isn't something to hide? What if your body's saying, I matter too? Try letting your anger finish its sentence for once. Stop cutting your anger off or shutting it down before you hear what it's trying to tell you. And I think when you get this reaction from people judging your neurodiverse brain, especially as a female, incorrectly, telling you you're too much, telling you you're not welcome, like othering you almost immediately, we have a core need to belong. that's why it's so extra painful to be harmed by your family. But in any group, at school, in classrooms, in sports, anywhere. So you can be yourself, you can feel really confident, you can, express yourself and feel, yeah, I'm being assertive and I'm standing up for what's right. I'm standing up for that person. I'm standing up for myself. I'm doing all the things that I know are right and according to my values. But you get beaten down and made to feel guilty and like you're too much, or you're asking for too much by asking to be treated like everyone else. You're high maintenance for asking to be treated with kindness, right? Your anger is telling you that you matter and a situation is not okay. And I know we've talked about masking when it comes to ADHD in order to be included and to, hide your symptoms and try to be more quote unquote normal just to be accepted. But masking your anger has a huge impact on your life, and it leads to shutting down. It leads to resentment. It leads to, broken relationships, fractured connections of all kinds that, maybe if you just expressed your anger or shared, this hurt me when you did this, or I'm really confused and I feel like I want to understand so I can have this relationship with you. Those conversations need to be had. And when we just pretend like we're not angry about something or pretend like nothing's wrong, you're not giving the other person an opportunity to mend. And you're not giving yourself the opportunity to stand up for yourself and to have a mutually, respectful and I guess like putting in, I don't know what I'm trying to say, like putting in the same amount of effort. Mm-hmm. Like you want someone to give you what you're giving them. A reciprocal. That's what I was trying to. Searching. I had it and then I lost it and then I found it again. But you want a reciprocal relationship.
Well, that it puts you, because ADHDers want to belong. They want to be
right.
Accepted. You've talked about this before, putting yourself into, like, staying in a relationship of any kind, a friendship, a familial relationship, a romantic relationship, staying in that, I guess, unsavory relationship because you're masking, because you're people pleasing, just because you want to feel that acceptance, you're sacrificing your mm-hmm. own well-being, your own happiness, because, well, this is what they're expecting from me and I should probably just do it. Like, yeah, you want it to be a mutually beneficial, reciprocal relationship where you're each putting in 50% and, that ebbs and flows. And sometimes it's 70-30, sometimes it's, 55-45. But it's, you're each getting something out of the relationship instead of you just trying to make sure that you're meeting all of the standards that the other person has set, or the expectations that they have set, and not worrying about your own well-being or feelings.
Yeah. And it's not an authentic connection then.
Right.
So you're not only harming yourself, but you're not actually giving that, you're not being honest with that person. And it's not like you're trying to be deceitful. You're trying to be accepted. So
but that leads to resentment
but it leads to,
of the other person, and then you feel terrible about yourself, like, who is this person? Like, you go home and you're like, who is that person?
Yeah,
like,
who was I? Yeah, and I think that's part of, like, when you're life is hard, but you got to do the right kind of hard. Do that hard up front so that you're, setting yourself up for the opportunity to have these real connections, these authentic relationships. And I know it's hard when you're, you especially when it's, when this situation is in your family of origin and, you're not old enough to even live out of the house yet. You're kind of stuck in that dynamic, so you have to do what you can to survive. But once you're out of that, you have to take these steps. I mean, can you imagine what your life might look like if you were never taught to fear your anger? And as a scapegoated ADHD woman, I often carried a silent rage, not because I felt broken, but because no one ever gave me permission to feel what was real. And healthy anger isn't about lashing out. It's about waking up to what we've been forced to hold in. Give yourself permission to feel what was never safe to say out loud. And I mean, definitely as an ADHDer, it comes out sometimes. You can't hold it in anymore. You get to a point where, you're receiving all those extra negative messages. You're receiving them at home, you're receiving them at school, you're starting to internalize them, you're saying them to yourself, and you just get overloaded and you explode, or no one is supporting you or teaching you, giving you the tools you need. That's why a lot of times when there's untreated ADHD, they're turning to alcohol, they're turning to vices, they're doing drugs, they're doing these impulsive, risky behaviors because they need this outlet in some way. And they haven't been given the tools to express their healthy anger.
And this is why, too, when, before, especially in children, before it's diagnosed for parents, you see this rage come out at the end of the day, at the end of the school day, and we've talked about this a million times, I feel like, but before we got our oldest son diagnosed, he would go to school or pre-K or, whatever, and he would come home, and then it was just like a tornado tore through the house, and we'd look at each other like, what is happening? He's not mad at us. He's not really mad at anyone. He has to keep it together and stay so focused and not let out any of these impulses all day. He gets home to a safe place, and it's like, okay, I can just be who I am. And that comes out at, sometimes it's like he's throwing toys all over the place, and it's like a literal tornado, and it feels like rage, but it's just a release of that, and it can be, I guess, misperceived as anger even then. And so, that's why the education, the coping mechanisms, treatments are so important, so that you're seeing these things not as healthy anger or as a release instead of, rage or...
Yeah, and instead of just reacting to the behavior, you have to stop and say, what's going on? What's going on with this? This is not, kids don't have malicious intent. Kids aren't, doing things to make their parents' life harder. They're trying to understand themselves. So you have to pause and say, what's going on here? And that's why, narcissistic parents play a massive role in your emotional suppression. So as scapegoats, you're never allowed to be angry. Only the narcissist was. And again, the anger was presented as rage. So we weren't given an example of healthy anger either. We were just raged at. And anger isn't the enemy. Shame is. That's where the narcissist rage is coming from. So when you've spent your whole life being told to quiet down, calm down, or shrink down, that anger doesn't just disappear, it festers. It turns into deep exhaustion. But that frustration you're feeling It's not a flaw. It's your nervous system trying to speak up for years of being silenced. And your emotions were used against you from the narcissistic parent. Again, you're too sensitive. Stop overreacting. Oh, here comes Angie Weiner being dramatic again. Your emotions being used against you as if they're a problem, or your emotions being completely negated because they're not, quote unquote fact. Your emotions don't matter at all. So bringing how you feel or how someone is making you feel doesn't matter. How does any child process that? And if that's all you've known in your childhood, how do you as an adult learn to process your emotions or not suppress your emotions, to feel them, to understand them? It's a lot of work. And the reality is, anyone would be angry after enduring this level of abuse. You need to let that anger tell you the truth about what hurt. So I know we've talked about on different episodes where if you ever treated the narcissistic person or the toxic person in your life the way they treated you, oh my gosh, immediately play the victim. You say something back to them that is even a quarter of what they've thrown at you. You are evil if you respond in any way that just isn't aligned with, their narrative or what they want, and you're not just going along to get along. Oh my gosh, how could they? They're so mean. It's like, do you even realize what you've done to me? Are you serious? I'm asking a question. I'm holding you accountable, and I'm telling you, this is what happened. It's not okay. And I'm being mean?
Yeah, accountability feels like an attack.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So think about that. When you know that this toxic person could never endure what they've put on you. And that's why they're putting it on you, because they don't want to feel it. But your anger is there for a reason. You have every reason to be angry with the way you've been treated. It's not okay. So it's time to learn to use your anger as a tool for healing. So reframing your anger, it is a response to injustice. It is not a flaw. Healthy anger is not rage. It's truth with a pulse. But when you've been trained to people please, mask, or manage someone else's emotions, that truth gets buried under guilt and silence. So anger doesn't have to be destructive. It can be directional. It can tell you exactly where you lost yourself, where you went wrong, where you did not align with your values. Start reclaiming your power by asking, where did I learn to make myself small? Why did I do that? I didn't like that interaction. I need to figure that out. I do not like that I got worked up and upset in that moment. What happened there? So how can you also channel your anger into healthy boundary setting and self-advocacy, which everyone has the right to. That's another thing that abusive and toxic people try to put on you, that you don't have the right. You're selfish if you stand up for yourself. You're selfish if you set a boundary. You're selfish if you act like you have rights. So what did every scapegoated ADHD woman discover when she stopped fearing her anger? Well, it wasn't something to control. It was something to listen to. When they actually look at what was making them angry, it wasn't something to stuff down, to control, to push away, to, this isn't the place for that or whatever. It was something to listen to and honor it and understand it's telling you a message. And anger is and has always been your internal alarm system, going off every time your boundaries are crossed or your truth is dismissed. You need to let it lead you back to what you deserved all along. It's in you. The second you start to feel resentful, it's usually because you didn't set a boundary, or you didn't express your anger or hurt, or you didn't have that conversation for clarity. It's not because of the other person. It's because you didn't do what you knew you needed to do. You stuffed it down. So process your anger through coaching, therapy, movement, sports, working out, walking, and different creative outlets to fuel that energy into something positive and to understand it and to give it an outlet. Some final thoughts. Anger isn't something to fear. It's very different from rage. But your anger is something to understand. When you stop suppressing it and you start listening to it, you can break free. So I would love for you to share your thoughts, journal about your anger, reach out for support. Until next time, truth tellers.